Okay, so hello everyone. I hope that the start of the semester is treating you all well, and thank you very much for taking the time to come along to today's training session, in particular for those who are attending live through Zoom, and if not, for those watching the recording, thanks also for taking the time to review it. So in this session today, what I'm hoping to cover is I'm hoping to look at basically a real kind of whistle stop tour of assessment and feedback in Canvas. Some of this may already be familiar to you, um, but if it isn't, hopefully there'll be a few kind of tips and tricks in here that might be of some use to you for the coming semester. So for this session today, where I'm hoping to cover, I suppose, assessments in Canvas in general, and then looking at assignments, Speedgrader, giving feedback in Speedgrader, the Gradebook, submitting on behalf of students, rubrics and resources, quizzes, other assessment formats, and then some general guidelines for assessments in Canvas. So in terms of the assessment features that are available inside Canvas, there's a number of different kind of elements available, and there are also additional kind of uh, software or kind of services that we have integrated into the Canvas system. So that includes tools like Turnitin and also ePortfolio software. Um, so rather than, I suppose, just boring you to death talking about these things, what I thought it best to do is to very simply jump into Canvas and begin the process of demonstrating the various assessment tools available. So probably the main assessment tool which is available inside in Canvas is an assignment. And an assignment is essentially just a virtual pigeonhole. So it's a space where students can submit a file for an assessment, and where you, the lecturer, can then access what students have submitted, review it, give them marks and feedback, all within the Canvas system. So the way that we can create an assignment is very simply, we go into our Canvas module, we go into assignments over on the left-hand side, and then we click on the big blue plus assignment button up here. So we can give the assignment a name. We'll just call this sample assignment 2026. And inside in the body kind of, or the kind of subject area here, what we can do is we can essentially add a number of, we have a number of features available to us in terms of what we can add. So we can obviously add in text and format that accordingly, so on and so forth. So this is kind of a good space if you want to give students instruction, if you want to give them some kind of brief. This is a really good space to be able to do that. You also have a range of features here in terms of being able to add in links, being able to upload images, upload media, embed H5P, or excuse me, YouTube, embed H5P tools, so on and so forth. And a really useful one actually is this one right here. So if we click on this little kind of document item, what this allows us to do is it allows us to basically upload a document. And what the Canvas system will do with something like this is it will simply allow us to, it'll basically insert the document as a link into this space. So for example, if I grab this and submit this, what that does is it simply puts a link to a particular PDF available. It makes it available to students within this space. So that's a really useful feature if it is something which you might like to do. For example, what I tend to do is I tend to write students just a quick overview of a brief here, and then I might add in full brief and upload the PDF there. So that's going to be a useful feature. Just one other additional feature available inside here is you can add in links to external websites like Google, NTU.ie, so on and so forth. But a useful one as well is this idea of a module link. So something which we might do is we might say this assessment will mainly uh, cover content from week 4. And what we can do then is we can either highlight it or we can leave it kind of freely available. And if we click on module link, what that allows us to do is it allows us to put in a link to anywhere in particular on the actual module. So we might say that, and then that is going to link to the unit that I've created in units for week 2. So all of this is just a useful way of being able to kind of clearly signpost to students what it is you actually want them to do for this assignment. In terms of points, generally we recommend leaving points at 100. The system just works better when you're marking out of 100, and you can always do the kind of the weighting in the kind of grade book, or else I suppose it's something that we have to do in the MyBand system anyway. You don't have to worry too much about assignment groups. You don't have to worry about whether this grade is displayed as. I usually leave it as points or percentage. One important element, however, is the submission type. So the most straightforward, kind of most flexible, most kind of reliable option available here is if we select online, we'll see that there's a number of entry options available to us. And the one that we really want to use is file upload. Text entry simply means that a student will be able to enter text directly into the Canvas system, but there's no option to save a draft or anything like that. So essentially, a student would have to do it all in one sitting. Website URL, if you want students to just give you a link, you can select that. If you want students to do some kind of media recording, that's an option. So that would involve them recording video or audio, for example, through their smartphones directly into Canvas. There is also the option for student annotation. And what student annotation allows me to do is it allows me to, let's say, upload a PDF as part of this assessment. And the job of the student then is not to submit something, but when they click on the option to start the assessment, they'll be shown the PDF and it's their job to annotate it and evaluate it and give feedback on it. But like I said, by far the most straightforward one really is file upload. Um, if you want to, you can select no submission. Essentially, all that really means is that they'll be able to see the brief and so on and so forth, but they won't really have any option to actually submit anything through Canvas. Another option is on paper, which is essentially the same thing. Um, Both of those, no submission and on paper, those might be useful if, for example, you want to have, let's say you're getting students to do an in-person exam as part of your module and you want to include information about it in Canvas. It can be useful to do that if you just want to include the brief for it. But generally, by far and away, the most reliable, straightforward, useful option that we've identified is file upload. Submission attempts, basically, you can limit this if you want to, for example, one or two, but we would strongly recommend leaving it as unlimited for the simple reason that if a student has only one attempt to upload a file and they upload the wrong one, then it's a bit of a nightmare because they'll be emailing it to you, they'll be trying to give it to you on a key, so on and so forth. If it's unlimited, the student can upload as many times as they want, but you will always be able to see what the student uploaded when. So unlimited, again, is just hopefully saving you a lot of pain and difficulty. Plagiarism review is something I'll talk about a little bit later in the session. Most assignments are not going to be a group assignment, so you can leave that unticked. Most assignments will not be, you won't need students to do peer reviews, so you can leave that unticked. Hopefully in another training session, be able to talk a little bit more about I suppose, the additional functionality that these tools make available. The other important area in terms of assignments is assign access. So the main thing here really is the due date. The due date essentially is the deadline that you want students to have this uploaded by. So let's say, for example, the deadline for this is going to be the end of January, just for the sake of argument. So I set the due date. That means the deadline for students is the end of January. Available from means that everything prior to this date or prior to this date, students won't be able to actually see this assignment in the system. So for example, I might say, okay, I want to give students the first week just to settle into the system. So I only want this to be visible to them in the system from the 26th onwards. Until does the opposite. Anything after this date, this assessment will be invisible to students. So I might say, I don't want this to appear for students until after the 16th of February. Now, generally, what we would recommend is that you set a due date, but you forget about the available from and the available until. The only time you'd really need to set these, I think, is if you're giving students kind of an in-person live quiz or MCQ, but within a specific time frame. So, for example, for an assignment, I don't want this to disappear off the system, for example, on the first, because that means if a student is submitting late, if they are late in handing it up, if I set this until they're not going to be able to see it after the 1st of February. And again, we're back to that same issue of they're emailing it to me, they're trying to give it to me in some other way. So generally, you can leave these alone for an assignment. I'll talk a little bit later about how they can be useful with quizzes, but generally, you can leave them alone. Something which can be useful as well. So by default, assign to basically means everybody in this module is supposed to do this assessment, and they're supposed to have it done by the 31st of January. There might be some students who, because of personal circumstances or because they have particular exemptions or so on and so forth, you might want to give them leeway to submit a little bit later than the 31st. So in that case, you don't need to duplicate the entire thing. What you can do is you can simply click on Assign To, and instead of everyone, I'm just going to select one particular student. So Dara has a good excuse or a legitimate excuse why he's not going to be able to give this on the 31st. So I'm going to say, okay, you can give it to me on the 7th. And you'll see this now means that Dara has a deadline of the 7th. Everyone else has a deadline of the 31st. So in that way, it's a simple and kind of quick way of allowing different students to be able to submit at different times. If we hit save and publish, that will then be available. And a good habit as well is to use the view as student button, which is up here. So from a student person, what this does is essentially it logs us in as a student. And we can see from a student perspective, they have all of the relevant information in the brief, including the link to specific units in this kind of area. So it automatically sends us to week 2. They can access the full brief if I decide to put that up. And then in terms of actually submitting, from a student perspective, they simply click Start Assignment. They select the file in question. They hit Submit Assignment. They can also add some comments in here if they so wish. Submit Assignment. And that then has been submitted on behalf of the student. So we have our assignment set up. We made it available to students. The due date has passed. Students have submitted their work. What we want to be able to do now is we want to be able to very simply see what students have submitted against this particular assignment and give them marks. So again, the way that we can do that is within the system. We simply click into assignments. We click on we try to remember what we called it, sample assignment 2026. And when we're in here, what we can do is we can click on the Speedgrader button up here. I might just mention if anybody has any questions or any queries, please do feel free to put them into the Q&A or into the webinar chat as we're going. So within the Speedgrader system, essentially Speedgrader is Canvas's marking and feedback tool. So what we can do is any student content will be displayed on the left-hand side. All of our marking features are available over here on the right-hand side. We can move through the various students that we have using the drop-down or the kind of arrow keys up here in the top right corner. So we're aware that only the test student, which is the student view, has a submission. So within here, we can now look at this. So when we select test student, what they submitted appears over here in the left-hand side, and their assignment comments are visible here on the right-hand side. We can also click on this if we want to download the original file. And we can also see when it was submitted. So if a student submits after the due date, or let's say they submit one file before the due date, another one after the due date, I'll be able to move through the different files that they submitted in this area up here. So maybe a little bit hard to kind of, or maybe a little bit disconcerting to understand the marking or the feedback tools, but essentially what I've given is a PDF, which is a series of screenshots. If I want to give students feedback on what they have submitted, what I can do is I can use this area over here on the right-hand side to give them, I suppose, general feedback. So this is feedback at a very general level. So it might be, well done, good work, solid introduction, watch out for spelling and grammar, etc., etc. If I want to give more specific feedback on particular elements, what I can use is I can use the tools that are available to me up here to kind of give feedback on specific areas. So a good one, for example, is this kind of pointer tool. So I might click on a particular piece of the student's work and I might say, this is not the right screen. Or, for example, if it was an essay, I might be able to say, your introduction is solid, but watch out for this and that. There's a highlighter tool, which we can use to highlight specific text. This isn't possible as this is just a series of screenshots, but get the idea. There's the option to add in kind of free text available here. Text feedback. And there is also an option to strike through text and also kind of a highlighter for highlighting specific elements or a box for drawing a box around specific parts. And with all of that, we can leave kind of more general feedback. So the main distinction here really is that these tools allow you to give very specific feedback on very specific parts. Over here is for the more kind of general overall feedback. The other feature which is available to us for the general kind of feedback is something that we can do is we can attach a file if we so wish. So for example, we might say, we might attach the original brief and say, please see the attached brief where I mentioned that this was the marking scheme or so on and so forth. There is also an option for video recording. So if we want to, we can click on this and it will allow us to actually record a video directly into Canvas, which we can use to give students feedback. And there is also as well this kind of annotation tool. So what we might say is, overall, very good work, full stop. Watch out for X, Y, and Z, so on and so forth. So obviously that's not perfect in terms of interpretation, but it does allow us to, I suppose that's a useful way of being able to very quickly give feedback. So if I don't feel like typing everything out constantly, what I can do is I can simply hit this. I can give them kind of a brief overall kind of statement on the quality of their work, and then I can always tidy it up afterwards. When I'm happy with the feedback, what I can do is I can give them a grade. Now, this grade is going to be out of 100 because that's what we set in the original assignment. So we'll say 66 for this. And when I'm happy with all of that, I simply hit the submit button. And that then is now entered into the system for our students. One important distinction, which I might just mention as well, is that you see here that kind of after I added the marks and feedback and hit submit, this option for hidden comes up. There is also this icon up in the top left corner, which has changed from what was an eye icon to now a kind of an icon with a line through it. So the useful way of understanding this is to maybe jump into the gradebook, which we can do by clicking on this icon over in the top left corner, or within the module. If I want to get to the gradebook, I can simply click on grades. So the gradebook, I suppose, is just the overall breakdown of all of the assignments, quizzes, and other assessments that I have for students inside in this particular module. And you can see there that kind of anywhere where this icon appears, it just means that a student has submitted work, but I haven't given it a mark yet. If I want to, I can always access that by simply clicking here into the cell for the relevant student versus the relevant assessment, clicking on the arrow here. And if I want to, I can hit Speedgrader, and that will take me to that student submission for that particular assignment within Speedgrader. But what I can do if I so wish, if I want to very quickly add feedback, is I can simply, rather than going through Speedgrader, if I just want to give students their marks, then what I can do is I can simply click into the relevant cell and I can put in marks for students. I also have this option to click on, again, that arrow icon, and that will give me a link to the assessment, to the Speedgrader. It will let me put in their grade, but I might also have, particular notes for different students. So I can select their status, for example, as missing or excused or late to submit. And I can also add comments in here, which is just, I suppose, as a way of helping to explain why particular students might not have been able to submit. One other thing which can happen is, for example, if a student for some reason has some technical issues in Canvas, isn't able to actually get the file to me through Canvas and they email it to me, something which I can do is I can click into the student cell, I can click on the arrow here, I can hit this option submit for student, and all that does is it simply allows me to grab the PDF or the file that the student would have emailed me, submit it, and then that's up in the system, and I can very simply click on the Speedgrader option to be able to give them their marks and feedback within Speedgrader. So that's a useful feature as well, just being able to submit on behalf of a student. Now, one thing that happens within Canvas is by default, when I start giving students marks and feedback, generally the way Speedgrader will work is I'll give this student their marks and feedback, I'll submit that, then I'll go to the next student, give them their marks and feedback, move to the next student, so on and so forth. And what we don't want is, let's say if I'm working in the order of students that's visible here, I don't want this first student getting their marks and feedback before the second student gets their marks and feedback, which is before the third student gets their marks and feedback, so on and so forth. So the way Canvas handles this is, for a particular assignment, you'll note that I icon with the line through it, which I mentioned before. What this means is basically that I can give students their marks and their feedback for a sample assignment 2026, but so long as that I is there, students aren't going to get any notifications, or they won't be able to see their marks and feedback until I take kind of an additional step of posting their grade. So what this means is that instead of this student getting a notification when I add their content, and then afterwards this student getting a notification when I add their feedback, and then this student getting a notification third in line when I give them their feedback, the marks and the feedback will go out to all the students all at once, which is the fairest way of doing it. So the way that I can make that available to students is I can go into the gradebook, I can click on the menu icon here, and I can hit the option to post grades. Alternatively, from within Speedgrader, what I can do is I can, if you just bear with me, if I go into the Speedgrader for this, what I can do is I can click on this icon up here and post grades that way also. And all that happens when I post grades is very simply that all of the students will get all of their marks and feedback. So I'm going to post that for everyone. And you'll see here this I icon will change or disappear. And if we go into the Speedgrader, you'll notice instead of having a line through it, it has no line through it now, which basically means this is visible this is visible to students. Also, that hidden item that was up there as well has disappeared also. The gradebook has one or two other useful features in case of use to. Something which you can do, for example, is let's say it's after the deadline, there's some students who haven't submitted, but I don't want to email every single one of those individually. So if I click on this icon or the menu icon for this particular assessment, what I can do is I can click message students who, and that will pull up this additional option, which is I can send a message to students who have not yet submitted, or who have submitted, or who haven't been graded. So for example, students who have not yet submitted, I might say, hey, just a reminder that this is due, ... Alternatively, after everyone has received their marks and feedback, something which I can do is I can say, okay, any student who scored less than 60% on this assignment, I might say, hey, I noticed you struggled with this assignment. Here's some extra resources that might be of use to you, or here's some additional elements you can do to improve your knowledge in this space, so on and so forth. So Gradebook is useful in terms of giving a general overview, but it is also useful as well just in terms of being able to, I suppose, take advantage of those additional kind of messaging options. It just can help make life a little bit easier. One other thing which I'm just going to touch on, but I'm not going to spend any actual time on, is a Turnitin, which is the plagiarism detection system for Canvas. So when we are creating an assignment, there is an option available to us here for plagiarism review. If it's not a file upload or a text entry, that's not visible, but when I click one of those, what will become visible here is plagiarism detection, and the option which we look for here is Turnitin. Now, I don't have time to go through Turnitin today, but there is another training session, and there's recordings of training sessions which are available. All Turnitin does is it essentially detects potential instances of student plagiarism. And what this looks like from a marking perspective is simply within Speedgrader, there will be the usual details, but there will also be this percentage score which indicates potential plagiarism. Not to say that that's definite plagiarism, but just potentially instances of plagiarism. And clicking on that percentage mark will give us the Turnitin analysis report, which tries to break down how it calculated that score, what the sections of this Turnitin thinks might be plagiarized material, so on and so forth. So, like I said, we don't really have time for it today, but there are additional sessions available on it. Additional marking features which are available then, I guess the other big one within Canvas would be quizzes. So what quizzes allow, very simply, is a multiple choice question, basically. So the way that we can create a new quiz is we can click on quizzes, click on the option for quiz survey. You'll be presented with two quiz engines. The choice that we are strongly recommending is new quizzes / surveys. Classic quizzes is an older system, but Canvas is going to phase it out over the next period. So the danger with picking classic quizzes is very simply that it might become obsolete, over the next kind of year or so, and those quizzes will be lost. So again, we'll give this a name. We'll call it quizzes 3. We leave it as a graded quiz. The other options are more so just for kind of surveying. We'll leave the mark points at 100. We can leave all of this as is. The submission type stays exactly like that. And assign access, we've already covered with the assignments. Now, instead of hitting save and publish, what we're going to hit here is build. So this is kind of setting up the shell for the quiz, which we're calling quizzes 3. And within here, then we'll be able to actually begin adding questions to the quiz. The way in which we can add questions to the quiz is very simply, we click on this blue plus button, and this will pull up a list of the various quizzes, or excuse me, quiz features that we can use. So for example, we might want to give a multiple choice quiz. That's going to ask us the title. So this is just a title for the quiz. We'll just call it MCQ1. The stem, which is the question. So which of the below is correct? And then the possible answers. E, A, C, D. We can pick which is the correct option for students by clicking on the item here, the kind of checkbox here. On the left-hand side, if we want to get rid of a question, we can do so by clicking on the bin icon to the right of it. We can add in answer feedback if we want. So for example, for this one, we might say that is correct. For the others, we might say, and again, this is entirely optional, that's wrong, here's why, so on and so forth. At the bottom of this section, then, we can, there's a couple of additional options here. You generally don't have to worry too much about them. You don't have to worry too much about aligning to outcome, and I'll talk about item banking in a second. This area, then, what we can do is, instead of a quiz, we'll put in an essay question. An essay question then will allow us to, an essay question then, instead of offering a multiple choice quiz, will very simply require the student to answer, to input text into a particular section. So please give an overview of, no, excuse me, this should be question number 2. This is what I'm asking the students to do for this particular item. And there's a number of options available here. For example, the rich content editor, if I want them to show the word count, or if I want to set a word limit for this particular item, I can do all of that. And when I hit done, that also is, excuse me, that also is added to my quiz. Something which we can kind of quickly do is, if we want to, we can hit preview, and that will give us a kind of like view as students. That will give us a perspective of what this looks like for the student point of view. And just as that is loading, in addition to, so yeah, from student perspective, they get the questions, they can submit, and then it'll auto grade it, it'll show them the feedback, so on and so forth. I can exit the preview by clicking on the exit preview button. In addition to adding quiz questions, another really important element then is under settings. So settings essentially determines how the quiz behaves. Most of these are not hugely important, but there are some that can be pretty important. Shuffling answers and shuffling questions is a good way of kind of making it more, I suppose, varied for the students, or helping to prevent collusion. One question at a time determines if students get shown one question, just one question per screen, or if they get kind of shown as one big scrolling page. Generally, you don't have to require an access code, but you might want to set a time limit. So, for example, if this is something that you want students to do as a summative assessment activity, then, for example, you might only want them to have access to this for 1 hour. Detecting multiple sessions is kind of a safety, or I suppose a security feature. So if the student is trying to access the quiz on multiple tabs at the same time, Canvas can detect this. You generally don't have to worry about any of the rest of these, with the exception of hide results from students. And if this is a summative activity, that is absolutely something that you do want to have ticked. If it's not ticked, what that means is that students will see, the question when they submit the quiz, they will see if they got answer submission, if they got questions wrong or right with what they selected. And obviously that is not something you want shared among a particular class. So generally we recommend simply clicking this, and then you can leave the rest of these unticked. So like I said, the main features there really probably would be the time limit and also hiding the results from students. If we jump back into a quiz that I already set up. So again, we can click into it, we can click into build. And so this is a quiz that has already been created, already had students submit to. If I want to, let's say, for example, if there's essay questions, those aren't going to be marked automatically by Canvas. Something that I would need to do is I would need to go into the moderate section. From here, I can see what students finished this, when their attempts was, how long it took them, so on and so forth. And if I click into the attempt option, I can see that, these are the things that they got wrong or right. But for any essay questions or similar, there'll be this option for waiting for grade. So from here, what I can do is, if I want to, I can give them feedback or additional comments if I want. But the main thing that I need to do is I need to click the tick or the X, the tick, if I'm happy with what they've given. That means it's marked, they've got their point. If I'm not happy with the essay response here, I'm going to click X, and that's going to give them 0. And based on that, they get their final score. There is also the possibility to fudge the points, which means manually adjusting kind of the overall mark. But generally, we recommend kind of doing that if you can at all. It can just make things kind of messy and tricky. So that is the quizzes feature. A final thing that I'll just mention in terms of quizzes then is the option to add items to item banks. So item banks are essentially collections of questions which are available to us. So as we're creating a quiz, something we can do is we can pick particular questions and we can add these to a particular item bank. The other feature which is available to us is if we click up into item banks here, something which we can do is we can identify an item bank that we've created earlier. And an item bank is essentially just a series of questions. So we can click into any banks we've created. We can add or remove questions out of those. And something which we can do as well is we can add those into the existing quiz that we're developing right now. So for example, if I click on item banks and then I click on all or random, what that will do is it will pull this entire bank into my Canvas quiz. And from here, if I click on the option to edit this, it will let me add in all the questions from that particular item bank. Or let's say if it's an item bank with 10 questions in it, it will allow me to pull in 2 of those questions, just 2 randomly, and allow me to give however many points I want per question. So the best way I think to test a quiz or to go about developing a quiz is to set it up based by adding all the questions, and then just, if you can, trying to maybe just view it as a student to make sure it kind of works correctly, or that is kind of functions correctly, because there are more moving parts with kind of setting up a quiz than there are for a basic assessment. One other thing which I might just mention in terms of quizzes is I've created this quiz, but I don't want students to be able to take it except, let's say, if it's an in-class kind of pop quiz. I only want students to be able to take it, let's say, this Thursday between 10 and 2. So for something like that, what is actually useful is available from and until. So I might say, okay, they're going to take it on Thursday at 10 o'clock. So I want them to be able to get it at 9:55, and I don't want it to be visible to students after they've completed it because I don't want any sharing of answers or anything like that. So, and again, this is just kind of a security measure. If I want them to be able to take this between 10 and 11, I'm going to set it like I'm going to add 5 minutes on either end, just in case for any technical difficulties. So they can get at it at 5 to 10, and at 5 past 11, it's going to vanish. And by setting it up in this way, what it simply allows me to do is it means there's no way students can get at the quiz. They can't see the quiz questions until the 22nd, essentially between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, allowing for some time on either end. A couple of general guidelines for assessments just to finish off. One of the biggest, I suppose, challenges or one of the biggest things that comes up where most problems come from in terms of assessments and Canvas is really just making sure all of this is clear to students, making it very clear to them, you know, when they're going to be able to access it, the deadline, for something like a quiz to be able to explain to them, it's not going to appear on your Canvas until this Thursday at 10 o'clock. And after Thursday at 11, you're not going to be able to see it anymore. So just clearly communicating to students the expectations and how all of this is going to work. Making sure that it's published, as we'd all be aware. Publishing is a feature in Canvas, which determines if something is visible or invisible. So just making sure that the assessment is published, making sure that they can access it. One of the best ways of doing this is very simply by using the view as student or potentially asking students, just getting them to see if they can access an assignment. And a final point then is just in terms of a couple of supports. There is 24/7 support available from Canvas through the web chat feature. Again, you just click on the help item, you click on web chat with Canvas support, and you can do a live web chat with a Canvas support agent for more local issues, anything in terms of cross-listing, anything in terms of tele requests, you can access us, you can get onto us at edtech@mtu.ie for more general issues like authentication into the systems or issues with your password. You can contact Service Desk or Avanti. And if you'd like to know more, if you go to tel.cit.ie under staff resources, we have links to all of the various resources that we've developed for staff, and that includes our knowledge base articles, our YouTube channels where there's recordings of all the training sessions that we've done, so on and so forth. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat or into the Q&A. So I'm just going to shut up for a second to allow people to do just that. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to take that as a sign that there are no questions. So all that's left to do is simply say thanks very much, everyone, for coming along to the session today and for your time and patience. We'll be running more training over the coming period. If you'd like to know more, you simply go to tel.cit.ie upcoming training, and our full list of training options are available there. So thank you so much for your time, and wishing you all the very best of luck at the start of semester. So thanks so much, everyone. Take care.